I came back from war, and they already buried me at home.
The text came through at 11:47 p.m., just as I was pulling into what used to be my driveway, after 8 months of eating sand and dodging bullets in Middle East. My phone buzzed against the dashboard, and I figured it was Sarah telling me she'd left the porch light on. Instead, I got, "Don't bother coming in. Locks are changed. Kids don't want you. It's over." I sat there in my beat-up Ford, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at those 21 words that just torched my entire life. 8 months of counting days until I could hold my wife again, kiss my kids goodnight, sleep in my own bed without wondering if a mortar was going to turn me into hamburger. "As you wish," I typed back, borrowing from The Princess Bride because even in my shock, I couldn't resist the reference. Sarah always hated that movie. That's when I noticed the cars. Sarah's silver Honda was there, sure enough, but parked right next to it, bold as brass, was a black BMW with vanity plates reading, "Flip for you." Real estate, I figured. Some hotshot who probably never worked a day with his hands. I ended the engine and sat in the darkness, watching my house. The living room lights were on, curtains drawn, but not quite meeting in the middle. Through that 2-inch gap, I could see movement. Sarah's blonde hair, unmistakable even from 50 yards away, and someone else, a man in a polo shirt holding a beer like he owned the place. 8 months fighting insurgents, I muttered to myself, and here I am, outflanked by a guy with better hair. The smart move would have been to drive away. Find a motel, call a lawyer in the morning, handle this like a civilized human being. But I'd been making smart moves for 8 months, following orders, keeping my head down, staying alive. I was tired of smart moves. I got out of the car and walked up to the living room window. Sarah was on the couch in her red silk robe, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The guy was mid-30s, tan, the kind of build that came from a gym membership rather than actual work. He had his arm around her shoulders, and they were laughing at something on TV. My TV, in my living room, on my couch. The guy leaned over and kissed Sarah's neck. She tilted her head back and smiled, the same smile she used to give me when we were dating. Before the kids, before the deployments, before everything went to heck. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, watching this domestic scene that should have included me. Then I turned around, walked back to my truck, and drove away. But not before I made one phone call. "Davidson Law Office, this is the emergency line." "Jim, it's Matt Harlan. I'm back." "Matt, how was the deployment? You sound—" "I need you to file divorce papers first thing tomorrow morning. Emergency custody, asset freeze, the whole 9 yards." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus, Matt, what happened?" I came home. 24 hours later, my phone was blowing up. 19 missed calls, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I was sitting in Jim Davidson's office, watching him shuffle through papers with the satisfied expression of a man who loved his job. "Your wife's attorney has been calling me every 10 minutes since 7 a.m., Jim said, adjusting his glasses. "Apparently, Sarah is very upset about the asset freeze." "I bet she is." I took a sip of coffee from a mug that read "World's Okayest Lawyer," Jim's idea of humor. "What's our position?" "Solid. You're still legally married, still half owner of all marital assets. The emergency custody filing was justified given your wife's abandonment of the marital home and introduction of an unknown male into the children's environment." Jim was in his 50s, built like a scarecrow, with the kind of sharp mind that made opposing counsel nervous. We'd served together in the National Guard before he went to law school. He was one of the few people who understood what 8 months in a combat zone could do to a man's perspective on civilian problems. Where are Max and Lily now? With Sarah's mother, Sarah's friend, apparently thought it would be better if he wasn't around when child services did their welfare check. Smart guy. Greg Dunlop, age 36, owns a house-flipping business called Dunlop Development. Divorced 2 years ago, no criminal record, except for a bar fight in Portland last year. Charges were dropped. I raised an eyebrow. "You work fast." "I have a good investigator. Speaking of which, here's what we know about your wife's activities while you were deployed." Jim slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, credit card statements, phone records. Sarah at restaurants I couldn't afford. Sarah at hotels I'd never seen. Sarah with Greg Dunlop, looking very much like a couple. "How long?" I asked. "Best guess, 3 months. Started right after your last leave." I remembered that leave. 2 weeks in February. Sarah had been distant, distracted. I'd chalked it up to the stress of me being gone, the difficulty of raising 2 kids alone. Turns out she wasn't as alone as I'd thought. What's our next move? Custody hearing is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Judge Patricia Mills, she's fair but tough. Military-friendly, doesn't like adultery, especially when kids are involved. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. This is Greg. We need to talk, man to man. I showed Jim the message. He grinned. What do you want to bet he thinks he can intimidate you? I'd say that's a sucker's bet. I stood up, pocketing my phone. I'm going to go have a conversation with Mr. Dunlop. Matt, don't worry. I'm not going to hit him. I'm going to do something worse. What's that? I'm going to be reasonable. Greg Dunlop worked out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The sign in the window read, Dunlop Development, Flipping Houses, Building Dreams. Through the glass, I could see him at his desk, talking on the phone with animated gestures. He was better looking than I'd expected. Not pretty boy handsome, but solid. The kind of guy who probably played college football before discovering that real estate was easier on the knees. He wore his success casually. Expensive watch, perfect teeth, hair that cost more than my monthly truck payment. I pushed through the door, setting off a cheerful chime. Greg looked up, and I watched recognition flicker across his face. He'd probably seen my picture on Sarah's phone, or maybe around the house before she took them down. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then hung up. You must be Matt, and you must be the reason my wife changed the locks. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, but only for a second. Then his shoulders squared, and I could see him shifting into whatever persona he thought would work on me. Reasonable guy, man of the world. We could work this out like adults. Look, Matt, I know this is a difficult situation. Difficult. I sat down in the chair across from his desk without being invited. You know what's difficult? Trying to sleep in a 120-degree bunker while mortars are falling, wondering if your family is safe back home. Turns out I was worried about the wrong kind of explosive. Greg's jaw tightened. I didn't plan for this to happen. But it did happen. And now you're sitting in my wife's life like you belong there, drinking beer in my living room, sleeping in my bed. Sarah told me you two were having problems long before I came along. I'm sure she did. Funny thing about problems, they tend to work themselves out when one spouse isn't around to work on them. I leaned back in the chair, studying him. Greg was nervous, but trying not to show it. His hands kept moving, adjusting papers, clicking a pen, straightening his tie. Classic tells. I'd learned to read body language in the army. Nervous people made mistakes. What do you want? He asked finally. I want my life back. But since that's not happening, I'll settle for making sure you understand the situation you've walked into. Which is, you're dating a married woman who abandoned her children to shack up with a stranger. You're living in a house that's half mine, sleeping with a woman who's still legally my wife and playing daddy to kids who don't even know you exist. Greg's face was getting red. Sarah's filing for divorce. This will all be sorted out legally. Oh, I'm counting on it. I stood up, straightening my jacket. See, Greg, you probably think I'm some broken-down soldier who's going to roll over and play dead while you steal my family. That's where you're wrong. Is that a threat? It's a promise. I didn't survive 3 tours in Middle East to come home and get ambushed by a small-time house flipper and his new girlfriend. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Greg, your car's leaking something. Might want to get that checked out. I left him sitting there, probably wondering what I meant. He'd figure it out soon enough. Outside, I walked around to the back of the strip mall where Greg's BMW was parked. I pulled out the small tube of axle grease I'd picked up at the auto parts store on my way over. It took 30 seconds to smear a generous amount under the driver's side door handle. Then I went home to wait for the custody hearing. Judge Patricia Mills looked like she could bench press a Buick and frequently did, just to stay in practice. She was in her early 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that made lawyers speak in complete sentences. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a thin woman in an expensive suit who looked like she specialized in taking men to the cleaners. Sarah had dressed for the occasion. Conservative blue dress, minimal makeup, the picture of wronged motherhood. She hadn't looked at me once since I'd walked into the courtroom. Your Honor, Sarah's lawyer began, my client is seeking emergency custody of the minor children due to Mr. Harlan's erratic behavior following his return from military deployment. We have concerns about his mental state and his ability to provide a stable environment. I felt Jim tense beside me, but Judge Mills held up a hand before he could object. Miss Chen, I've read the filings. Mr. Harlan filed first, and his petition raises some interesting points. Before we discuss his mental state, perhaps we should discuss Mrs. Harlan's living arrangements. Sarah's lawyer shuffled her papers. Your Honor, my client's personal relationships are not relevant to her fitness as a mother. Her adultery isn't relevant? Her abandonment of the marital home isn't relevant? The introduction of an unknown male into the children's environment without background checks or the father's consent isn't relevant? Your Honor, I'm not finished, Miss Chen. Where are the children now? With Mrs. Harlan's mother. And where is Mrs. Harlan living? A pause. She's staying with a friend. Would this friend be Mr. Greg Dunlop, the man she's been having an affair with for the past 3 months? Sarah finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with anger. I gave her a little wave. Your Honor, Jim stood up, we'd like to call the children to chambers for a brief interview if the court permits. Granted. Bailiff, please bring in Max and Lily Harlan. My kids walked into the courtroom holding hands, looking small and scared in their Sunday clothes. Max was 10, all elbows and knees and serious brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Lily was 7, blonde like her mother, with a gap-toothed smile that could power a small city. They saw me and broke into grins that made my chest tight. Daddy! Lily ran across the courtroom and launched herself into my arms. Max followed, more reserved, but just as happy to see me. Hey, monsters, I whispered, hugging them tight. I missed you. Judge Mills watched this reunion with interest. Children, I'd like to speak with you in my office for a few minutes. Is that okay? They nodded, still clinging to me. 20 minutes later, they emerged from chambers with the judge. Max and Lily came straight back to me while Judge Mills took her seat with an expression that didn't bode well for Sarah's case. Based on my conversation with the children, the judge said, I'm granting temporary custody to Mr. Harlan. The children expressed clear preference to live with their father, and they disclosed some concerning information about their mother's behavior and Mr. Dunlop's interactions with them. Sarah shot to her feet. Your Honor, you can't. Sit down, Mrs. Harlan. You abandoned your children to live with your boyfriend. You changed the locks on the marital home to keep their father out. You told them their father didn't want to see them anymore. Did you really think this would end well for you? Sarah's face was white. I want to appeal. You're welcome to try. In the meantime, Mr. Harlan will have primary custody. Mrs. Harlan will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings. This court is adjourned. As we walked out of the courthouse, Max tugged on my sleeve. Dad, why did Mom lie to us? I looked down at my son, this serious little boy who was trying to make sense of an adult world that didn't make much sense to begin with. I don't know, buddy, but you don't have to worry about it anymore. Are we going home? Yeah, we're going home. 2 weeks later, I was settling into a routine that felt almost normal. The kids were back in school. I'd found work with a local construction company, and we were figuring out how to be a family of 3 instead of 4. Sarah had visitation rights, but she'd only used them once. She'd shown up at the house with Greg, which violated the court order about supervised visits. When I pointed this out, she'd screamed at me in front of the children and stormed off. That's when I decided to escalate things. I started small. Sarah had left behind boxes of personal items, photo albums, books, decorative objects that held sentimental value. I carefully packed them up and had them delivered to Greg's office. Each box was labeled with helpful notes. Sarah's memories of our honeymoon, Sarah's love letters from her husband, Sarah's wedding dress. The delivery guy told me later that Greg had looked like he was going to have a stroke. Next, I did some research into Greg's business. Turns out house flipping was a competitive field, and Greg had made some enemies. A few carefully placed phone calls to his competitors, sharing some interesting information about his current personal situation, and suddenly, Greg was having trouble getting contractors to work with him. Word gets around fast in construction, I explained to Jim over lunch. Nobody wants to work for a guy who steals other men's wives. Bad for morale. You're playing with fire, Matt. I've been playing with fire for 8 months. This is just a different kind of heat. But the real psychological warfare started when I discovered Greg's weakness, his image. He was the kind of guy who lived for social media, constantly posting photos of his success, his lifestyle, his perfect girlfriend. His Instagram was a carefully curated showcase of the life he wanted people to think he was living. So I started leaving comments. Nothing threatening, nothing that could get me in legal trouble, just helpful observations from Sarah's husband. Great restaurant. Sarah and I had our anniversary there in 2019. Nice suit. Sarah always said I should dress better. Beautiful sunset. Sarah loves romantic evenings. Hope she told you about our first date at that same beach. Within a week, Greg had blocked me from all his social media accounts, but the damage was done. His friends and business contacts had seen the comments. Questions were being asked. The perfect image was starting to crack. Then Sarah made a mistake that handed me the perfect opportunity for revenge. She called my mother. Mom lived in Florida now, but she'd raised me to be a gentleman and a good husband. She'd loved Sarah like a daughter, had been devastated when she heard about the divorce. So, when Sarah called her, crying about how I was being unreasonable and vindictive, Mom called me. Matthew James Harlan, she said, using my full name the way she had when I was 10 and had broken something expensive. What exactly are you doing to that poor girl? That poor girl cheated on me while I was deployed, Mom. That's between you and her. But you're the father of her children, and you need to act like it. I am acting like it. That's why I have custody. Don't get smart with me, young man. I sighed. What do you want me to do, Mom? I want you to be the bigger person. Show some class. I'll think about it. But I wasn't thinking about being the bigger person. I was thinking about Sarah's phone call to my mother and what it told me about her state of mind. She was desperate, reaching out to anyone who might take her side. That meant she was vulnerable, and vulnerable enemies made mistakes. The mistake came 3 days later in the form of a text message from Sarah. We need to talk, just the two of us. Meet me at Murphy's bar tonight at 8. Murphy's was a dive bar downtown, the kind of place where construction workers went to drink away their paychecks and nobody asked too many questions. It was also where I'd been spending some of my evenings getting to know the locals and building a network of allies. I showed up at 7:30 and found a table in the back where I could watch the door. Murphy's was busy for a Thursday night. Shift workers from the plant, a few college kids playing pool, the usual collection of regulars nursing beers and watching sports on the TV above the bar. Sarah walked in at exactly 8 o'clock, looking around nervously until she spotted me. She was dressed down, jeans, sweater, minimal makeup, trying to look like the old Sarah, the one I'd fallen in love with before everything went wrong. Thanks for coming, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Wasn't sure you'd show up alone. Greg doesn't know I'm here. That was interesting. Trouble in paradise, maybe. What do you want, Sarah? She fidgeted with her purse strap, not meeting my eyes. I want to work something out. For the kids. The kids are fine. They're happy. They're in their own home. They're with their father. What more do they need? They need their mother. They had their mother. She chose Greg instead. Sarah's face flushed. That's not fair. Fair? I leaned forward. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been getting a Dear John letter while I was deployed. Fair would have been waiting until I got home to tell me you wanted a divorce. Fair would have been thinking about your children before you decided to blow up their lives. I made mistakes. You made choices. There's a difference. The bartender, a guy named Tommy who knew me from my regular visits, caught my eye and nodded towards Sarah. I shook my head slightly. Whatever Sarah was planning, I wanted to hear it without interruption. What do you want? I asked again. I want joint custody. I want to sell the house and split the proceeds. I want us to be civil for the kids' sake. And what do I get out of this deal? You get to move on with your life. Find someone new, be happy. I almost laughed. You think that's what this is about? You think I'm holding on to you out of some misguided hope that we'll get back together? Aren't you? Sarah, I wouldn't take you back if you came with a warranty and a money-back guarantee. This isn't about winning you back. This is about consequences. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of consequences? The kind that teach people not to screw over soldiers while they're deployed? Sarah stood up abruptly. You're being ridiculous. I'm trying to be reasonable here. No, you're trying to minimize the damage from your choices. There's a difference. She leaned over the table, lowering her voice. You can't keep punishing me forever, Matt. Eventually, you're going to have to let this go. Who says I'm punishing you? I'm just living my life, taking care of my kids and letting the chips fall where they may. Bees. You're sabotaging Greg's business. You're harassing us online. You're turning everyone against me. I'm not turning anyone against you, Sarah. You did that yourself when you chose to have an affair. She straightened up, her face hard with anger. Fine. If you want to play games, we'll play games. But remember, I know things about you too. Such as what really happened during your last deployment. Such as why you really came home early. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Because I think Greg's lawyer might be very interested in your medical records, your psych evaluations, the real reason you were discharged. Now I understood. This wasn't about reconciliation or even negotiation. This was about leverage. Sarah had done her homework, probably with Greg's help, and thought she'd found something she could use against me. The problem was she was right. You're bluffing, I said. Am I? She smiled, and for a moment I saw the calculating woman who had replaced the girl I'd married. See you in court, Matt. She walked out, leaving me sitting alone at a sticky table in a dive bar, wondering how much she really knew and how much damage she could do with it. The answer, I realized, was quite a lot. 3 days after Sarah's threat, I got a call from Jim Davidson that confirmed my worst fears. They're going for a psychological fitness evaluation, he said without preamble. Sarah's lawyer filed a motion claiming you're suffering from PTSD and pose a danger to the children. I was sitting in my truck outside Max's school, waiting for pickup time. Around me, other parents were arriving for the same ritual. Soccer moms in SUVs, working dads in pickup trucks, the comfortable suburban routine of child rearing. Can they do that? They can try. Judge Mills will have to decide whether there's enough evidence to warrant an evaluation. And if there is, then you'll have to submit to a psychiatric examination. If the results are unfavorable, you could lose custody. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of consequences settling on my shoulders. Sarah had found my weak spot and was pressing hard. How much does she know, Matt? Enough. I watched a group of kids playing on the school playground, their laughter carrying across the parking lot. There was an incident during my last deployment. Nothing criminal, but complicated. Want to tell me about it? Not over the phone. My office. 1 hour. I hung up and sat in the truck, watching normal people live their normal lives. A mother pushing a stroller, a father helping his daughter with her backpack. Simple, everyday moments that felt impossibly precious and fragile. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Psychological evaluations can be tricky. Lots of ways they can go wrong. Maybe we should talk. Gee. Greg was making his move, following up on Sarah's threat with an offer to negotiate. The smart play would be to take the meeting, see what they wanted, maybe work out some kind of deal. Instead, I started the truck and drove to Jim's office. Tell me, Jim said once we were behind closed doors. So I told him about the convoy that had hit an IED outside Kandahar, about the 3 soldiers who died, about the investigation that followed, about the questions regarding my decisions as convoy commander and the medical evaluation that had found me fit for duty but recommended early rotation home. No charges were filed, I finished. No official reprimand. But there were questions about my judgment under stress. Jim was quiet for a long moment. How bad could this look in court? Bad enough? Sarah's lawyer will paint me as a broken soldier who cracked under pressure. She'll argue that I'm unstable, potentially violent, unfit to raise children. And the truth? The truth is that I made a split-second decision in a combat zone, and 3 good men died because of it. The truth is that I've been living with that for 8 months, and some days it's harder than others. But you're not dangerous. Not to my children, never to my children. Jim nodded. Then we fight it. We get our own evaluation. We present evidence of your stability and fitness as a father. We show that this is a desperate move by a woman who's losing custody of her children. What if that's not enough? Then we make sure Sarah has bigger problems to worry about. I looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean that 2 can play the investigation game. Sarah's not exactly living the life of a saint right now. Adultery, abandonment, cohabitation with a man who has a history of violence. If she wants to dig into your past, maybe it's time we started digging into hers. Do it. Matt, do it. I'm tired of playing defense. Jim nodded slowly. All right, but understand, once we go down this road, there's no going back. This stops being about custody and becomes about total war. It became total war the minute she threatened my children. I left Jim's office with a sense of grim purpose. Sarah wanted to escalate? Fine. But she was about to learn that soldiers didn't just know how to fight wars, they knew how to win them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Greg. Offer expires at midnight. After that, things get complicated. I typed back. Things are already complicated. You just don't know it yet. Then I drove home to have dinner with my children and plan my counterattack. Jim's investigator was a woman named Rita Kowalski, a former cop who specialized in domestic cases. She was in her 40s, built like a fire plug, with short gray hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "Your wife's been busy," she said, spreading photos across Jim's conference table. "3 different hotels in the past month, always with Mr. Dunlop. Credit card receipts show expensive dinners, shopping trips, a weekend in Boston." "How is she paying for all this?" I asked. "The asset freeze should have cut off her access to our joint accounts." "That's the interesting part. Greg's been picking up most of the tabs, but Sarah's been using a credit card we didn't know about. Opened 6 months ago, in her maiden name." Jim frowned. "That suggests premeditation. She was planning this divorce long before she asked for it." Rita nodded. "Gets better. I talked to some of Greg's neighbors. Apparently Sarah's been staying at his place for weeks, but she's been telling people she's house-sitting while he's out of town." "Why would she lie about that?" "Because she's still technically married and cohabitation affects spousal support. She's trying to have it both ways, play the abandoned wife in court while living with her boyfriend in private." I studied the photos. Sarah and Greg at restaurants I recognized, but had never been able to afford. Sarah shopping in stores that were way above our usual budget. Sarah laughing and smiling in ways I hadn't seen in years. "There's more," Rita continued. "Greg's business is in trouble. He's leveraged to the hilt on 3 properties that aren't selling. His ex-wife is suing him for back alimony. And he's got a gambling problem. Poker games twice a week usually loses big, so he's not the successful businessman he pretends to be. Not even close. My guess is he saw Sarah as a way out. Marry a woman with assets, use her divorce settlement to shore up his business." Jim leaned back in his chair. "This is good, but it's not enough to counter the PTSD angle. We need something that directly undermines Sarah's fitness as a mother." Rita smiled. "Funny you should mention that." She pulled out another set of photos. These were taken last Tuesday night. The photos showed Sarah and Greg at Murphy's bar, the same bar where she'd met me the week before. But these were from a different night, and Sarah was clearly drunk. Very drunk. In one photo, she was leaning heavily on Greg. In another, she was arguing with the bartender. In the last one, she was being escorted out by security. Tommy, the bartender, says she was belligerent, tried to pick a fight with another customer. Greg had to carry her to the car. Was she driving? No, but here's the kicker. She had her purse with her, and when it spilled on the floor, prescription bottles fell out. Anxiety medication, sleep aids, pain pills, all prescribed to different names. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Different names? Her mother's, her sister's, Greg's ex-wife. She's been doctor shopping, collecting pills from multiple sources. Jim whistled softly. That's a felony. Prescription fraud. And it explains her erratic behavior, I added. The mood swings, the poor decisions, the paranoia. Rita gathered up the photos. I've got statements from the bartender, the security guard, and 2 witnesses, plus pharmacy records that show the pattern of prescription misuse. How did you get pharmacy records? Rita's smile was enigmatic. I have friends in low places. I looked at Jim. Is this enough? It's a start, but we need to be careful how we use it. If we come on too strong, it looks like retaliation. What do you suggest? We let them make the first move. When they present their psychological evaluation request, we respond with our own motion questioning Sarah's fitness, presented as a natural response to their allegations. I nodded. When? The hearing's set for next Friday. That gives us a week to prepare. As we were leaving the office, my phone rang. Sarah's number. Matt, we need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say. Please. It's about the kids. Something's happened. I felt my blood go cold. What kind of something? Just meet me at the house, our house. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before I could respond. I looked at Jim. Change of plans. This might be the break we've been waiting for. Sarah's Honda was in the driveway when I arrived, parked at an angle that suggested she'd been in a hurry. The front door was unlocked, which was unlike her. Sarah had always been obsessive about home security. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. She looked up when I walked in, and I was shocked by her appearance. She'd lost weight, her hair was unwashed, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Where are the kids? She asked. Safe, at my mother-in-law's house. It was a lie. They were at school, but I wanted to see her reaction. Good. That's good. She rubbed her face with both hands. Matt, I need to tell you something. I sat down in the chair across from her, the same chair I'd sat in thousands of times during our marriage. The room looked different now, smaller, shabbier, like a set from a play that had closed. I'm listening. Greg, he's not who I thought he was. What do you mean? He's been lying to me. About his business, about his finances, about everything. Her voice was shaky, uncertain. He owes money to some very bad people. I felt a prickle of alarm. What kind of bad people? The kind who break legs when they don't get paid? Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street like she was expecting someone. He borrowed money from a loan shark to finance his last property deal. $50,000 at 20% interest. The deal fell through, and now he can't pay. What does this have to do with me? She turned around, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. He wants to use our divorce settlement to pay off his debt. He's been pressuring me to ask for more money, more assets. He says if I don't get enough, he'll... She trailed off. He'll what? He'll tell them that I'm good for the money, that I have a rich ex-husband who'll pay to keep his family safe. I stood up slowly, feeling anger build in my chest like steam in a boiler. He threatened my children? Not directly, but he made it clear that these people don't care about collateral damage. Why are you telling me this? Sarah's composure finally cracked. Because I'm scared, Matt. Because I made a terrible mistake. And now I don't know how to fix it. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Sarah had always been a good liar, but this felt different. This felt real. What do you want me to do? I don't know. Help me figure out how to get away from him. How to keep the kids safe. The kids are safe. They're with me, where they belong. I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve them, or you, or any of this. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But they're still my children, Matt. And if something happens to them because of my mistakes? I felt my anger wavering, replaced by something more complicated. This was the woman I'd married, the mother of my children, scared and vulnerable and asking for help. Then I remembered the prescription bottles, the photos of her drunk at the bar, the psychological evaluation she was trying to force on me. When's the last time you talked to your lawyer about the PTSD evaluation? Sarah's face went pale. What? The psychological fitness evaluation. The one where you're going to try to paint me as a dangerous, unstable veteran. When did you last discuss strategy with your attorney? Matt, because I'm thinking that conversation probably happened after you found out about Greg's gambling debts. I'm thinking maybe this whole thing is a setup, designed to get me to drop my guard and agree to a more favorable settlement. That's not, isn't it? I stood up, looking down at her. You come here all scared and vulnerable, telling me about dangerous loan sharks and threats to our children. You appeal to my protective instincts. Hope I'll ride to the rescue like the good soldier I used to be. Then, once I've agreed to help, you drop the psychological evaluation and we work out a deal that gives Greg the money he needs to pay off his debts. Sarah's tears had stopped. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. This is just another manipulation, Sarah. Another lie in a long series of lies. She stood up, her fear replaced by familiar anger. Fine, you want to think the worst of me? Go ahead. But when something happens to those kids because you were too stubborn to help, that's on you. Nothing's going to happen to my kids because they're not going to be anywhere near you or your boyfriend. You can't keep them from me forever. Watch me. Sarah grabbed her purse and headed for the door. You'll regret this, Matt. When Greg's friends come looking for money, when they decide that intimidating you is the easiest way to get paid, you'll wish you'd listened to me. Is that another threat? It's a warning. The last one you'll get. She slammed the door behind her, leaving me alone in the house that used to be our home. I stood there for a moment, thinking about what she'd told me. Some of it might have been true. Greg probably did have money problems, and men like him often made deals with dangerous people when they got desperate. But Sarah's timing was too convenient, her performance too calculated. This was psychological warfare, designed to make me doubt myself and agree to terms that favored her. Well, two could play that game. I pulled out my phone and called Rita Kowalski. I need you to dig deeper into Greg's finances, I said when she answered, and I need you to do it fast. What am I looking for? Proof that my wife is lying again. The proof came faster than I'd expected. Rita called me at 6 a.m. the next morning, her voice tight with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Greg doesn't owe money to loan sharks. He owes money to his ex-wife's divorce attorney." I was making coffee in my kitchen, getting ready to wake the kids for school. "What do you mean?" "The 50,000 Sarah mentioned? It's not a gambling debt. It's legal fees from his divorce, plus penalties for missed alimony payments. His ex-wife's lawyer has been garnishing his business accounts." "So no dangerous criminals?" "Unless you count divorce attorneys. But here's the really interesting part. Sarah knows all this. I found emails between her and Greg where they discussed the loan shark story. She helped him come up with it." I set down my coffee mug, feeling pieces click into place. They planned the whole thing. "Gets better. Remember those prescription bottles? I tracked down the doctors. Sarah's been telling them she's caring for elderly relatives, getting pills prescribed for fake patients. She's been selling the extras to buy Greg times with his creditors." Jesus. "And the psychological evaluation motion? It was Greg's idea. He researched your military service, found the convoy incident, convinced Sarah to use it against you." I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar rage building, but this time it was cold and focused. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She'd used my worst memories against me, turning my service into ammunition to hurt me. "Rita, I need you to document everything. Every email, every prescription, every lie. Can you have it ready by this afternoon?" "Already working on it. But Matt, this is enough to destroy them both. Are you sure you want to go nuclear?" I thought about my children, asleep upstairs, trusting me to protect them. I thought about the soldiers who died in that convoy, whose memory Sarah was using as a tool in her divorce strategy. I thought about 8 months of deployment, counting days until I could come home to a family that had already written me off, I'm sure. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:30, I sat in Jim Davidson's office, watching him review Rita's report with the expression of a man who'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket. "This is prosecutable," he said. "Prescription fraud, perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud. Sarah could go to prison." "I don't want her in prison. I want her out of my life." "What about Greg?" "Greg's a different story." Jim looked up at me. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Greg made this personal when he decided to use my military service against me. I'm thinking he needs to learn that some lines shouldn't be crossed. Matt, nothing illegal, nothing violent, just educational." At 2 p.m., we walked into Judge Mill's courtroom. Sarah and her lawyer were already there, looking confident. Sarah had cleaned herself up, put on a professional suit, applied makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She looked like a concerned mother fighting for her children. She didn't look like a pills dealer who was helping her boyfriend commit fraud. That was about to change. "Your Honor," Sarah's lawyer began, "we're here today because we have serious concerns about Mr. Harlan's psychological fitness. His military service, while admirable, has left him with trauma that affects his judgment and potentially puts the children at risk." Judge Mills looked skeptical. "Do you have evidence of this trauma affecting his parenting?" "We have evidence of poor decision-making under stress, documented in his military records. We believe a psychological evaluation is warranted to ensure the children's safety." Jim stood up. "Your Honor, if we're questioning psychological fitness, I think the court should consider all relevant evidence." Such as Mrs. Harlan's prescription pills misuse, her fraudulent medical claims, and her conspiracy with Mr. Dunlop to manufacture false evidence against my client. Sarah's face went white. Her lawyer looked confused. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but these allegations are documented." Jim placed Rita's report on the court clerk's desk. Pharmacy records, email correspondence, witness statements, and photographic evidence of Mrs. Harlan's illegal activities. Judge Mills accepted the report and began reading. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of pages and the sound of Sarah's increasingly rapid breathing. After 10 minutes, the judge looked up. "Mrs. Harlan, according to this report, you've been obtaining prescription medications under false pretenses and selling them to finance your boyfriend's legal debts. Is this accurate?" Sarah's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but Sarah just sat there staring at the table. "Mrs. Harlan? I need to speak with my attorney." "You can speak with your attorney in jail. Bailiff, please take Mrs. Harlan into custody pending formal charges of prescription fraud and perjury." "Your Honor," Sarah's lawyer said desperately, "my client is willing to withdraw her motion and agree to any custody arrangement Mr. Harlan prefers." "Too late for that. Mrs. Harlan made her choice when she decided to commit felonies to finance her divorce. As the bailiff led Sarah away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with an expression of pure hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." Greg was waiting for me in the courthouse parking lot, leaning against his BMW like he was posing for a magazine ad. He'd dressed for the occasion. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of confident smile that said he thought he still had cards to play. He was wrong. "Rough day for Sarah," he said as I approached my truck. "Rough day for Sarah's boyfriend, too, I'd imagine." His smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. Sarah's going to prison, Greg, and when she gets there, she's going to have a lot of time to think about who convinced her to commit felonies." "I didn't convince her to do anything." I pulled out my phone and played an audio file. Rita had been thorough. She'd managed to get recordings of several phone conversations between Sarah and Greg, including one where he explicitly suggested the prescription fraud scheme. Greg's face went pale as his own voice filled the parking lot. "Look, baby, you've got access to doctors, right? Your mom, your sister, they've got medical issues. Maybe we can get some pills prescribed, sell them to my guy Tony, just until I get caught up on the legal fees." I stopped the recording. "That's conspiracy to commit fraud, Greg. Probably enough to put you away for 2 to 5 years. You can't use that. It's illegally obtained." "Maybe, but Tony Marchetti might be interested in hearing it. You know Tony, right? The guy you've been buying pills from? The one who doesn't like it when his suppliers get arrested?" Greg's confident facade cracked completely. "What do you want?" "I want you gone. Out of town, out of state, out of my life. You've got 24 hours. I can't just leave. I have a business obligations." "You have debts and legal problems. Your business is failing. Your ex-wife is garnishing your accounts, and now your girlfriend is in jail for crimes you talked her into committing." I stepped closer, letting him see the 8 months of deployment in my eyes, the 3 dead soldiers, the long nights wondering if my family was safe while I was protecting strangers. "Here's what's going to happen, Greg. You're going to liquidate whatever assets you have left. You're going to pay your ex-wife what you owe her, and then you're going to disappear. And if I don't, then I'm going to make sure Tony knows exactly who set up his supplier to get arrested. I'm going to make sure your ex-wife's lawyer gets copies of every financial record Rita dug up. And I'm going to make sure the state attorney's office knows about your role in the prescription fraud scheme." Greg was sweating now, despite the cool autumn air. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone again. "One call to Tony, one call to the prosecutor, one call to your ex-wife's lawyer. Your choice." He stared at me for a long moment, probably calculating odds, weighing options, trying to find an angle that didn't end with him in prison or worse. Finally, his shoulders sagged. 24 hours? 24 hours. He got in his BMW and drove away without another word. I watched his taillights disappear around the corner, then got in my truck and drove to pick up my children. Max and Lily were waiting at the school entrance, backpacks slung over their shoulders, looking like any other kids at the end of any other day. They climbed into the truck, chattering about homework and friends and weekend plans. "Dad," Lily said as we pulled out of the school parking lot, "is Mom coming home soon?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror, this 7-year-old girl who deserved better than the mess her parents had made of their marriage. "No, sweetheart, Mom's going to be away for a while." "Because she did something wrong? Because she made some bad choices?" Max, older and more perceptive, studied my face. "Are we going to be okay?" "Yeah, buddy, we're going to be fine." And for the first time in 8 months, I believed it. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch watching Max and Lily play in the yard when Rita Kowalski's car pulled into the driveway. She got out carrying a manila envelope and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who just finished a job well done. "Thought you'd want to see this," she said, handing me the envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings, court documents, and a letter from the state attorney's office. Sarah had pled guilty to prescription fraud and received 2 years probation plus community service. Greg had disappeared, leaving behind a forwarded address in Nevada and a string of unpaid debts. "He liquidated everything," Rita said, settling into the porch swing beside me. "Paid off his ex-wife, sold his remaining properties at a loss, and left town in the middle of the night." "Good. Sarah's been asking about the kids. Her lawyer wants to know if you'd consider supervised visitation once she completes her probation." I watched Lily push Max on the tire swing we'd hung from the old oak tree in the backyard. They were laughing, carefree, secure in their world in a way they hadn't been since before my deployment. "What do you think?" Rita asked. I think some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. That's harsh. That's realistic. Sarah made her choice when she decided to use my military service against me. Some things can't be forgiven. Rita nodded, understanding. She'd seen enough domestic cases to know that some wounds went too deep for healing. What about you? Any plans for the future? I looked at my children, my house, my life that was finally stable and peaceful. I'm thinking about going back to school, maybe teaching. Kids seem to like me. Good for you. After Rita left, I sat on the porch until sunset, thinking about the past year, the betrayal, the anger, the systematic destruction of the people who'd tried to destroy me. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt like closure. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. I know what you did. This isn't over. I deleted the message without responding. Sarah would be angry for a long time, probably forever. But anger without power was just noise, and Sarah had no power left to hurt me or my children. Dad, Lily called from the yard. Come push me on the swing. I put my phone away and walked into the yard, where my children were waiting. The past was finished. The future was just beginning. And for the first time since coming home from deployment, I was exactly where I belonged.